here's why everybody else in the financial services industry is abuzz about women. We are in the midst of an extraordinary transfer of wealth into the hands of women. It's estimated that between 2015 and 2020, $22 trillion will move into the hands of women. It's a pretty staggering number. That's T, trillion. Why is this happening? Well, women are inheriting. Women traditionally inherit from husbands who are oftentimes older and have a shorter life expectancy. And women are also now inheriting more and more from parents. Historically, it was that family wealth was transferred from parents to maybe the first son or the sons, and daughters, well, they inherited from their husbands. That has changed, so now a lot more of the inheritance is transferring to women. In fact, 70% of what will be inherited over the next 2 generations will be inherited by women. But it doesn't stop there. We're also making rapid economic strides. Right now, more bachelor's degrees and graduate degrees are earned by women, and women are working. 57% of women are in the workforce, which is up from 34% in 1950. And not only are women working, they're working their way up, climbing corporate ladders and running their own businesses. 44% of women are the breadwinner, and 60% of high net worth women earned the money themselves. So that's a lot happening in the world of women and wealth. In fact, there is a 90% chance that you will be the sole financial decision maker at some point in your life. 90%. Pretty impressive stat. All right, so let's talk about why that might be. Traditionally, we think about divorce and death, kind of the uncertainty that leads a woman to suddenly be in control of money. And while statistically that is still a part of the picture, there's a lot of good things happening. And so what I want to submit to you this morning is that we shouldn't be ready to embrace our finances just in case the worst happens. We should be ready anyway. We should already be ready, right? Women more and more are engaging with their finances because they are maintaining separate property. Women are getting married later. Maybe they're not getting married at all. And if you get married later, you've maybe already made some of your own money. You've got some of your own financial principles. You aren't necessarily just living only in a joint community world. And there's also a sense of greater knowledge, greater empowerment. There's information finally available to women. Women want to be educated about this. So women are becoming financial decision makers also by choice, not just because of the worst, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. So all of this money is coming into our hands. We're going to be in control of an enormous amount of wealth. But we don't think or act like men. Seems pretty basic, huh? Maybe a generality, a bit of a stereotype. But the empirical data and study of the brain both support this. We just simply don't think about things the way that men do. I've highlighted here, you probably can't see it because it's a bit of a stretch, but let's talk through some of them. Men are more likely to sit down and say, I understand what's going on. I get it. No need to explain to me what's going on in my portfolio. I've got this taken care of. So there's a perception that men have things more under control. While women are more apt to buy and hold, men like to engage in a lot of trading. So they're engaging in a lot more activity that maybe makes it appear like they've got kind of a better idea of what's going on. Women set measurable goals. I want to retire early. I want to buy a house. A man sets out and says, I want to beat the market. Nothing wrong with that, just a different goal-setting perspective. And the one that I think really hits home is if a man makes a bad financial decision, he's likely to say, I had bad information, something bad happened in the market, the economy softened. If a woman makes a bad financial decision, she blames herself. And I think we can all kind of sit back and say, I think there's some truth to that. I want to pause here and remind everybody, if anybody's got questions or wants to interject, please. I don't want you to have to just listen to me all morning. Okay, so we don't think the same way as men. That's pretty basic, I think. but we also don't face the same financial circumstances as men. And this is what's important, I think. So we are more likely to go in and out of the workforce. A woman on average spends 15% of her working years outside of work, caring for children, caring for parents, other dependents. A man on average spends 1.6%. So that's a big discrepancy still. Women are more likely to work a part-time job so that they can be available for caregiving needs. Well, if you're working in a part-time job, you have access to fewer benefits. You're probably not getting as generous of a 401k match. Maybe there aren't healthcare benefits. So those can have really impactful long-term effects on a woman's ability to save for retirement or to have enough money to feel comfortable that she can put food on the table. Women still take on traditionally more of the housekeeping and child-rearing responsibilities. So we are going to work and then also coming home and working at home. So that makes it a bit of a stretch. And we're more likely to not only be responsible for the care of our children, but the care of our family. And then, of course, the one that we all think about, the pay gap. So we, on average, still make about 78 cents to the dollar for a man. And while we think a lot about this and how that impacts us today, the ability to put food on the table or buy a nice house, and that is true, that's a setback, earning less makes it harder to save for retirement. And that's the second time I've mentioned that because it's important to remember this is a marathon. Your relationship with your finances, it's your whole life. So the things that are a setback today could potentially be a setback in the future. And I don't want to be morose about this. This certainly isn't a man-bashing angle that I want to take. But I think that when we think about how we're going to engage with our financial well-being, it's important to set the stage of what are the circumstances under which we're doing that, and what are the things that you can be addressing and acknowledging. Okay. I don't, like I said, want this to be all about me talking to you guys. I want us to spend a little bit of time reflecting. Before we do that, I want to kind of set the stage that before we start talking about how we're going to lean in and we're going to get more engaged with our finances, I want to just talk about the fact that you don't have to do this by yourself. This isn't about being in control of your money. This isn't about suddenly saying, I'm taking my half of the money out of our joint account, honey, and I'm going to go do my own thing with it. It's not about being a financial genius. It's not any of that. In fact, what I would submit is one of the most important things you can do is determine who your team's going to be, and we're going to get into that. I have this conversation a lot with people, and they say, oh, I don't want to be in control. I don't want to be the boss of it. That's fine. I don't necessarily want to be the boss of my money. It's just important that you know what's going on. I'm going to share an anecdote with you to that end. A couple years ago, we worked with a client. We advised a couple. We managed some money for them, and the husband was selling his business. And my team and I put together a really great transaction that was going to save him a whole pile of money on taxes when he sold his business. And we spent months talking about it. And the transaction was pretty nuanced, and it was going to have some ramifications for the way that he and his wife left the money for their kids. And we talked through that. And I said to him on more than one occasion, we really need to talk to your wife about this. How does your wife feel about this? Oh, she's okay with it. She thinks it's a good idea. Okay, fine. And we get to the end. We're at about the 11th hour. We're getting ready to put this plan into place. And I attend a meeting with both of my clients, the husband and the wife, their attorney. We're sitting at the conference room table, and we're talking about some things. And I look over at her, and she's just white as a ghost. She didn't understand what was going on. She thought she did, and she's doing her best. And I don't think that her husband was being malicious and leaving her out of the conversation per se. I think she just maybe wasn't that engaged. And when we started to really talk about, well, what's going to happen and, how might this impact the money that's transferred to your kids and some of those nuances, she realized, I'm not so on board with this. This isn't as good of an idea as maybe I thought. And I will never forget the look on her face. She was just panicked. So I'm happy to report that we took a step back and we restructured the transaction and their marriage survived, and we sold the business and mitigated some taxes and it all worked out. But I will tell you, she calls me now all the time. She calls me directly, separately from her husband. Wow, exactly. She calls me and just says, I'm looking at this statement. I'm not sure I understand. I said, okay, sure, yeah, let's talk about that. Here's what it is. And it's great. I've talked to her more in the, 18 or 24 months since we did the transaction than I ever had before. So that's what it's about. It's just about leaning in. She still doesn't attend most of the meetings. Her husband attends most of the meetings, and he's still kind of the driver of their decisions and what have you. But she's a heck of a lot more engaged than she was before. That's what I'm encouraging you to think about. So I want you to spend a couple minutes, maybe talk to your neighbors. Hopefully a couple people will be willing to share. What are the things that you're worried about in your finances right now? And it can be, is the economy going to tank? Am I ever going to be able to buy a house? Am I ever going to pay off my student loan debt? I was laughing earlier. My worry this morning is that my husband's going to spend too much money on a Valentine's Day gift. He's a bit extravagant. So think about what's on your mind this morning. Let's just talk about what are we concerned about. And because it's Valentine's Day and we need to cheer up because it's a little rainy outside, what are some things you're excited about? Kim and I were just talking about, she snuck ahead and was looking at the list of goals, and she's checked a bunch of them off already, and she was feeling pretty happy about that. So what are some of the things in your finances that you're feeling good about this morning too? Spend a couple minutes, and then like I said, let's share a little bit amongst us. Is anybody willing to talk to us a little bit about what's on their mind this morning? Not all at once. Okay. Do you want this? Okay.
Good morning. Lisa and I discussed investing. So that's one of our top priorities. So if you have some funds set aside, we don't want them just sitting in the bank. We want them working for us, but we don't really feel adequate to go out and find an investment.
Sure. Who else feels like that? Okay. What else? What else is on our mind, Rahel?
For me, it's retirement.
Okay.
I'm having a great time right now in my life.
Yeah, you're so young and you work at my bank, you're not going anywhere.
Right. And so I know at some point I need to, just bring it in and, really start to think about, I have a 401k and I have pension.
Are you contributing to it?
I am.
Okay,
I am contributing. Good. And I have a husband, and so I know he's saving, but it's like, are we saving enough? You see all of those, commercials, and then you start to get worried and, do I have to change my lifestyle, drastically when I retire? So I don't want to have to do that. So that's my biggest concern.
Okay. It's a good one.
Well, I was thinking there's just so many different investments, I was just discussing with these young women that I feel very comfortable now at living in the Palisades because the property has gone up over the years.
Sure.
So we actually made money that way without having naturally.
Absolutely, you did, sure.
So we're comfortable and we don't want to move, but sometimes, you never know about faith, and we both work our lives, and still my husband's still working and he enjoys it. So I'm just letting him do that, That's what he wants to do.
Gets him out of the house after all.
Yeah. So we're okay right now. We have grandkids and we're comfortable.
Good. All right, anyone else? Come on, you can't be shy all morning. I could talk your ear off all morning. Okay.
One of the things I shared is that my husband and I have had different experiences growing up. My parents saved and were just very moderate, and my husband's parents really didn't. And so I think because of that, he has a lot of anxiety about the future and saving.
Sure.
And so it's always figuring out that balance of being able to kind of enjoy the present, but also being responsible about the future without doing it from a place of anxiety.
Absolutely.
Trying to manage
Absolutely. That. Yeah. You want to share? Okay. All right. Anyone else? Okay. I want to circle back on something because I had a sidebar while we were all getting to know each other. This is harder than it looks. I threw a lot of statistics at you when we were talking about what does the world look like. And I want to take a step back from that for two reasons. The first is there's a lot of different ways to cut the numbers. So I did a lot of research. I'm kind of always got my head in this space around what does it look like for women in the economy right now. And it depends on who you ask. It depends how they did their research. So some of the numbers skew differently depending on how you look at them. But there's a second thing that we also need to consider. What race you are depends. It depends on what your status is going to look like. So Kim and I were talking about, and she said, as an African-American woman, are those numbers different for me? And I said, yes, they are. They are. So I think that's something else that we need to think about. That yes, we are women, and yes, we are all in this together, but we all have different backgrounds. So we want to look at that too. And I thought that was such an important and poignant thought. Thank you for sharing that. But that's something else that we really need to think about. When we're in this conversation, and I'm always encouraging people to, lift as you climb. We've got enough hurdles that we're facing as women. We can't be hurting each other in the workplace or hurting each other out there in society. We really got to be lifting each other up. And we really need to be mindful that we're not all in the same position, even though we're all women. So just wanted to kind of step back and sidebar on that because I thought it was such an important point. Okay, so now that I've got everybody worried about their money and worried about what they're going to do with it, how are we going to lean in a little bit? Okay, where's my clicker? Oops, I'm missing some slides. That's okay. How do you lean in on this? I want to talk about what is not necessarily a roadmap to become a financial genius by the time this breakfast is over, but just some thoughts on some things that we can all be doing every day to feel a little bit more engaged and empowered around our finances. So the first step, in my opinion, is identify your team. Who are the people whose opinions you trust? We get a lot of unsolicited advice all the time. Rahel, you mentioned it. You're always seeing, are you saving enough? And are you doing the right things? And people are telling you, oh, I've got the best guy. You should go talk to him. He's a brilliant investor. You got to meet him. Or, oh, you shouldn't be in real estate. You should be in this. It's always all the time. But who do you trust, right? How do you really make sense of where this is? Now, I've listed here, obviously, people like your attorneys, your estate planning attorney, or your business attorney, maybe your divorce attorney, and your CPA, your investment professionals, the people who for a living give you advice about your money. But I also think we need to be thinking about who are our friends and family that we trust? Who are the people that you go to just kind of gut check? And maybe it's people who are positioned similar to you. They've got, the same similar socioeconomic status. Maybe they've also got young kids and you're thinking about those things. So identify who your team is, who's your tribe of people who are helping you, and go to them frequently. Check in with them, make sure that you're, kind of checking in with them and talking to them. And ignore everybody else, because there's a lot of noise out there about what we should be doing with our finances, and it can be overwhelming. So identify your team, and maybe if you want to think about who those people are, for me, it's my parents, it's my really good friend Justin, and maybe one or two other people, and everyone else I just think, you don't really know that much about what you're talking about. So think about who your team is. Okay. I want to talk about two things. I want you guys to talk about them. This is how we're going to get engaged with our money and with one another. I have a two-part activity for you. Part of engaging with your finances is understanding where you stand, okay? So I've put together a list of questions, and I handed them out so everybody could look at them. It looks like this, but it's on a piece of paper. And it's a litany of questions. Ideally, you should be able to answer off the top of your head on any given day, every single one of them. Kind of daunting. And some of you in the room might be able to do just that. Some of you might not be able to answer a single one of them, and that's okay too. So I want you to take a few minutes, look at this list, think about, okay, do I feel confident that I could answer these questions? I'm not going to put anyone on the spot about that, but think about that. Maybe talk with your neighbors if you're comfortable about it, and let's just assess where you stand. And then this is a list that you can use to kind of say, this is what it looks like to be engaged. Now, I'm not asking you, what's the rate of return on your portfolio and what's your asset mix and what's a REIT and things like that. but just, do you have a portfolio of investments? Do you own your home? What does it look like? So let's consider some of these questions. And then the second part is I want you to talk with your neighbors, think about it among yourselves. What are your goals? We break goals into 3 categories: needs, wants, and wishes. Your needs are pay rent, pay your mortgage, put food on the table, have appropriate clothes to wear to work. Your wants are a diamond tennis bracelet, a new Mercedes, maybe a vacation with your family. Maybe it can be small. What are the things that you want but you don't necessarily need? And then what are your legacy goals? How do you want to be remembered? What do you want to leave for your children or your loved ones? What do you want to leave for a charity? Maybe you want to leave something for your alma mater or your church, your favorite charity. What are your thoughts around that? Those are the 3 categories of goals. Now, before we break into it, let's set the stage. Goals change. A couple years ago, I paid off my student loan debt. That was my biggest financial goal for the longest time, would just be out of student loan debt. Okay? It's not a goal anymore. Hopefully it'll never be a goal again. I don't have any plans to go back to school, but we'll see. Your goals change. Sometimes they're small. I just want to be able to pay rent for the rest of this year. And sometimes they're big. I want to buy a vacation home, or I want to take my mom on an exotic trip. So your goals change as your life changes. So think maybe about the goals you've already achieved. How does that change your perception of the goals you might set for yourself in the future? And then just remind yourself that you should set goals all the time. I would say every year, sit down and set a couple of financial goals for the year, and then think about what are my long-term goals and how have they changed since I thought about this last year. So spend some time thinking about it. To jog your creative juices, I provided some goals. This list is by no means exhaustive. I would love to hear some of the goals that you have that aren't on this list. And talk with each other and let's see what we come up with. Ooh, getting better. All right. Oh, sorry, love. All right, let's bring it back to the full group. Love it. Thanks. I need that, seriously. Yeah, I'm talking now. Okay. Anybody willing to share how many of the questions about where they stood relative to their finances they could answer? It's okay if the answer is 0. It's okay if you want to brag a little bit and say you knew every single one of them. Okay.
I'll give it a minute. It's not gonna.
All right.
So, because of going back to school at a later age, after I raised my son and had a business for 30 years, and going
Can everyone
back to
hear
school,
Kim?
Now I created more debt, but I also feel as though it's going to be a short-term debt because of the fact that I have allowed myself to get into another financial income status.
Sure.
Because of the education, which is going to
Sure.
allow me to make more money.
Sure. So you're servicing more debt, but it's debt that's going to help you get up and you'll be able to pay it off quickly. Perfect. I love that. So you're feeling pretty good this morning, I think.
Yeah,
I think you should. I think you should.
Bother me.
Good. I like it. Anyone else? Where do we stand?
Just what I was thinking about is that a year ago, I did know my combined income and net worth, but then if you ask me that question today, I don't.
Really?
So
Okay.
it's kind of like you have to keep up.
Absolutely.
with the changes. So,
Absolutely
I
you do.
just realized when I look at it, I go, oh, no, I don't.
And that's a great point. It's always in flux, right? We got to be thinking about this. Anyone else? Thoughts on where we stand? All right, but we're all committed to know where we stand, right? That's the goal. All right. All right, what about our goals? These ones I am going to make you guys talk about because this is the good stuff. This is what it's all about. This is what's fun. What are we working towards? Anyone? Aki.
I'm thinking about this year to establish a really good emergency fund, not like a 1 month or 2 month living expenses, but maybe if I could work towards maybe a year, and that would give me at least some sort of like peace of mind that I could do whatever I want.
Absolutely it would. That's a great goal. I love it. Anyone else? Come on. Bunch of strong, powerful women like you. I know we got more goals in here.
I have the same goal. I'm going to be turning 60 this year, so I wanted to make sure that I had a substantial amount of money saved away
Good.
so that I could feel a little bit more relaxed as a single woman.
Good. I like it. You guys are hitting on something. We as women are concerned about running out of money. Uma and I were talking about that this morning. We worry about that, so I'm not surprised to hear that we're working on nest fund or on nest eggs. What else? Vivian. Good one. How old are your boys? Okay, so it's not that far off. It's pretty daunting, huh? College is a heck of a lot more expensive than when I was there. It's pretty crazy. It's a great one. Anyone else? Vanessa?
Our group talked about the box maintaining my health.
Okay.
How expensive that is.
Didn't expect to see that on a financial goals chart, did you?
But we also talked about being on the forefront of that is going to save us money than if we didn't take care of ourselves. And our
Absolutely.
bodies are fine.
Absolutely.
That and I'm saving for a massive bathroom.
Perfect. I love it.
Which will help my health. So.
Perfect. It absolutely will. I couldn't agree more. And you know what? Healthcare is getting more expensive. I mean, the price of it is going up tremendously every day. So we want to make sure that being able to afford our healthcare doesn't keep us from staying healthy. Come on, guys. What else?
Well, we kind of decided we want peace of mind retirement.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of agreed on that.
Good. Did you talk about what peace of mind might look like?
Peace of mind is having, in my mind, having enough money to live comfortably and you're healthy
Yep.
enough to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Peace of mind.
Do you want to stay in your home?
That's another question that might change depending on
Right.
what's happening
Right.
with healthcare.
Well, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Right? As we get older and we need more care, where do we want that care delivered to us?
Yeah, you have to get kind of insurance and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Somebody taking care of you. Yeah, this is things that come up later in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing about insurance is it's a lot easier to get it when you don't need it.
Right.
You know? Anyone else? All right. Okay. Going once, going twice. All right. I know you got a lot of goals you just don't want to talk about. I'm going to put this away. See if I can do better this time. Okay. All right. So we've identified who our team is, right? We've thought about who are we going to rely and trust to help us make decisions. I recommend Susie Orman. She's pretty great if nobody's watching her. So we have identified our team. We've taken stock of where we stand. We've either evaluated that we know what our position is, and it's not about saying I'm in a good position, right? It's just about knowing what your position is. When you're young and you just got out of college, your financial picture looks like probably some student loan debt and maybe generating a good income for the first time. And then when you're thinking about retiring, you're looking at what are the assets I've accumulated? What does my income look like now? So none of this is about being rich or having the best financial picture. It's about just knowing what it is. So we've talked about where we stand. We've set some goals for ourselves, right? And we're going to talk about that they change as we get older, as our circumstances change. We'll make them yearly and we'll make long-term ones. Okay. What else? What else can we do to lean in? We can understand risk. I know everybody was waiting for me to bring out a really fancy financial chart like this, and I didn't want to disappoint this morning. This is the efficient frontier. My colleagues are laughing over here because a couple years ago we had to learn all about it, and it's just about as dry as it comes. So I'm going to spare you the gory details, but I put it in here for a reason. There is a stereotype about women that we are risk adverse. And we're probably not going to be great investors because we are risk adverse. We don't want to take risks. And I'm here to tell you that is a ridiculous stereotype. We are risk aware. So yeah, maybe we don't take on as much risk as men, or we don't appear to take on as much risk. We think about things for the long term. We think about how is this actually going to impact us. So we are risk aware. And I'm here to tell you, ladies, statistically, that makes you better investors. Women oftentimes outperform men as investors because of the way that they think about risk. So let's take that silly stereotype and throw it right out the window. But let's talk about how risk works, okay? For every unit of risk that you take on, you should be getting return in exchange for that risk. So Kim, if you and I both are taking the same amount of risk in our portfolio, but you're generating a much better return, my portfolio is inefficient. I'm taking on too much risk for the amount of return that I'm getting. So you want to be calculated in the type of risk that you take. And I want to encourage you to say, it's okay to take risk. Your money's not really going to perform or grow very much if you don't. So you need to be willing to step out on a ledge a little bit and take some of that risk. But you don't want to take risk unnecessarily. You don't want to be foolish about the type of risk that you're taking. So it's always important to think about what's associated with this. I bought a house last year. Pleased as punch to have done it, but it's a huge risk. I owe the bank a lot of money now. What if the real estate market just totally tanks tomorrow? I'm not going to feel very good about that. I'm taking on quite a bit of risk for that. But I think in the long term, I'm going to get a pretty decent return. We already talked about that this morning. And hopefully in a couple decades, I'll look back and think, look at what this house is worth now, right? So risk is okay, but you don't want to be foolish about it. So that's something to think about. What risk am I taking? And then finally, because I am an estate planning geek, we're going to make a plan. So I want to talk about how you go about making plans in two different phases. We think a lot about estate planning for what's going to happen when you pass away. And we will talk about that. That's a very important part of it. But you should also make plans for the people that you might be taking care of. Who are the people who might be relying on you to make decisions for them? Maybe healthcare decisions? Maybe taking care of their finances for them? How many of you think you might be in charge of your parents' finances one day? It's a pretty big responsibility. Do you know that you have the right legal authority to be in charge? Have you seen a copy of, the trust where you're the successor trustee? Have you seen a copy of the healthcare power of attorney in case you're going to make decisions for somebody? It's really important to know that if somebody's going to be relying on you, you have the right authority to do so. You don't want to find out you don't have the right authority when you're in the hospital or something has happened. And you want to make sure that you really understand what their wishes are. Do you really understand what your parents' goals are, or your spouse or your siblings, people you think might be relying on you? Maybe it's adult children. And then conversely, of course, the thing that we always think about are the plans that you make for yourself and your family. Estate planning. I know everyone's really jazzed up. This is what you came here for this morning. It's important to establish an estate plan. And people generally think that estate planning is just for people who are old. Wrong. Everybody needs an estate plan. Everybody. Now, what your estate plan looks like will be informed probably by your age, by where you are in life, what your mix of assets look like, what your family circumstances look like. So, for instance, I'm married. I don't have kids. And what my husband and I have is in our 401ks at work and that house I just mentioned. Okay, that's our mix of assets. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to pass that along. You designate some beneficiaries and off the assets go. Okay, Vivian shared with us earlier she has minor children. That just got a little bit more complicated. Who's going to take care of them if something happened to both you and your husband? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for them to go to college if you and your husband are both gone? So your estate plan just got more complicated, and we didn't talk for a single second about who has more money. Right? Okay? Some of us might have children who are going to rely on us forever. Okay? Do you have a child for whom you need to establish a special needs trust or something like that? So you should be thinking about your estate plan every 3 to 5 years. Sounds a little daunting and a little ridiculous, but I'm going to give you 3 reasons why. Your family changes. As your kids get older, in a few years, you won't worry about who's going to take care of them because they'll take care of themselves. But your parents might get older. Suddenly you're thinking, all right, I need to be making some plans for my parents. So your family changes. Your assets change. I'm hoping that in 20 or 30 years when we have this conversation again, I'm going to be telling you guys all about, my fancy art collection that I have in addition to my 401k. So I'll have to be doing some different planning for that fancy art collection. And then the third, completely out of our control and a bit of a roller coaster, the federal tax laws. So right now, we're probably thinking about the tax laws a lot because they just changed in the most profound way that they have since 1986. But before this year, when was the last time you really checked in on what's the estate tax exemption? What are the federal income tax brackets? I mean, I do because I'm a geek and it's my job, but most of us not very often. So those 3 reasons you should be updating your estate plan every 3 to 5 years. Estate planning is important to identify what your wishes are if you become incapacitated. We talked earlier about, do you want to stay in your home? Do you want to get the heck out of your home? Okay, who's going to make those decisions for you? Who's going to be in charge of your assets if you can't be in charge? So if you become incapacitated and you can't write checks anymore, you can't pay your bills. And then who's going to be in charge of something if the ultimate happens, right, upon our demise? Who's going to be in charge? And then estate planning is also an opportunity for us to determine our legacy goals, right? We often think about estate planning being, oh, in my will, I'm going to say I'm going to give this, this, and this to so and so and so and so. So that certainly is part of it, and we'll jump into how that might look. Just because I have to be a little bit of a scare tactic, what are some of the potential pitfalls of failing to plan? Outliving your money, that'd be kind of a bummer. Becoming a financial burden on your kids, Uma, we were talking about that earlier. That would be a bummer. Facing staggering healthcare costs without being able to pay for it. And then when it comes to when you pass away, if you don't have a good plan, the state of California will make a plan for you. Just trust me on that. They have a plan. They will split your assets up and distribute them out. And that's the probate process. And it is long and ugly and expensive, and nobody wants to be a part of it. So let's avoid that. So without further ado, we talked about who's going to be in control, and I saw a couple people kind of go, that's an interesting thing to mention. But it's pretty important, and I don't think we give it quite enough attention. And you should think about this both, right? If somebody's asking you to be in control of something, and then who are you going to put to be in charge of something? And this is the role of the trustee of your trust or the personal representative of your will. We think of this as the executor. This person is going to be responsible to administer your estate and take care of all of your assets in a time of grief, according to a fiduciary standard, which is the most serious under the law. And it all has to be done in a really timely and efficient way. So you want to put some thought into, is your oldest child really the best person for that job? Is it really a good idea to put all 3 of your kids in charge of that job together? Or is that maybe going to drive a bit of a wedge between them, right? So give it the time and attention that it requires to think about, who am I leaving in charge of this? Particularly if, in Vivian's case, let's say, I'm sorry to keep killing you and your husband, but if something were to happen and Vivian's done some great planning, I'm happy to report. If something were to happen and you were going to leave your assets in trust for a long time, somebody might be in charge for quite a while. We want to make sure that they're up to the job. All right, so how are we going to leave these assets to our loved ones? Let's talk through what some of the options are. And please stop me if you've got questions, thoughts, concerns. We could give the assets outright to somebody. What would be the benefit of that? We just transfer and say, here, Jennifer, are all my assets. They're for you. Jennifer's now fully in control of everything. She can do what she wants with them. Great, no strings attached. It's pretty simple. Send Jennifer on her way. What if Jennifer's got some creditors? I know everyone thinks of leg breaker Louie, but an ex-spouse is a very common creditor. And for those of us who are in professional settings, if you're a dentist, you're more likely to have a creditor at some point just because that's the way it goes. So creditors aren't necessarily just always a big, bad, horrible thing. We want to protect from them though, right? Okay, so maybe that's not the right way. Maybe it is. We could leave the assets in trust. We hear a lot of buzz around trusts, and I'm sure people are kind of like, oh yeah, I've got a trust, or I know about trusts, great. A trust can say almost anything you want it to. As long as it's legal, and as long as it's not contrary to public policy, your trust can say whatever you want. So you need to think about how it might function. Are you going to leave the assets in trust for your kids or your loved ones forever? And maybe the trust is just there, and if they need it for their health or education or just general maintenance, they can go to the trustee, and the trustee will say, sure, that's great. Or you know what, you need a new car, not so much a Maserati, but I heard the new Civic's really nice. Okay, you have a trustee who's in that position forever. Or maybe you use a trust as a temporary vehicle. Okay, you leave it in trust, and when your child is 25 or graduates from college, he or she can have all the money at that point outright. Or maybe you think a little bit at 25, a little bit more at 30, and then the rest of it at 40, something like that. That's kind of traditionally how we see. So you want to think about who are the people that you're leaving the money to, right? You might have one kid who is just as solid as could be with his or her finances, and you think, gee, at 17, they could have been running an empire, and maybe they were. And then sometimes you've got, you know, my 38-year-old brother who can't manage money to save his life. So you want to think about who it is that you're leaving things to, because that will determine how your estate plan looks. Your estate plan is also not just about passing your assets. We've talked a lot about who's going to be in control of things. You want to make sure that you've got a healthcare power of attorney. Who's the person who's going to make decisions for you if you can't? Might not be your husband. Might be. He has the legal authority to if you don't have a document. But who's the person who's really going to advocate for you in the healthcare delivery system? That's a tough setting. Financial agent, who are the people who are going to take care of the day-to-day things for you? And then who's going to execute your wishes if you're terminally ill? Who are you going to ask to be in charge of that decision? This is all part of estate planning. You can see why I like it so much, right? You guys are going to rush out and become estate planners? All right. All right, and then I want to end, because I hate to end a presentation with killing everybody. Let's talk about your charitable legacy, right? We talk about charity more and more frequently now. Even just this morning, we were having a conversation about social enterprise. Millennials more and more are engaged in this idea of social entrepreneurship where, yeah, I would love to buy a pair of your shoes and you're going to give another pair of shoes to somebody who needs them, right? This concept of as part of your business plan, you're giving back to the community. And I just love that that's what we're driving. The young generation is driving that. But how else do you give to charity? So right now, many of you maybe write a check to a charity every month on a regular basis or on an annual basis. That's just an outright gift. You can do the same thing upon death, a bequest in your estate plan where you say, when I pass away, please pass X number of dollars to my favorite charity. You might use a donor-advised fund. That's a vehicle where you have an entity like Fidelity administer an account for you, and you put money in the account, which is a charitable deduction. That's a qualified public charity. And then you leave it in the account until you're ready to decide what agency you actually want to give it out to. So it's a really nice vehicle for people who want to accumulate money. I see people use it to accumulate, oh, I want to save up $1 million and get my name on a building. You can hold it in that vehicle. The donor-advised fund is administered by an organization. I mentioned Fidelity. They're kind of the biggest out there, which takes a lot of the burden off of you from an administration perspective. Conversely, a family foundation, there are a lot of reporting requirements to a family foundation. They're a lot of work. They became really popular in the last 10 or so years. I call it the Bill and Melinda Gates effect. Everybody kind of wants to have a foundation with their name out there. People are moving more to the donor-advised fund now because family foundations are a lot of work. But they're a great vehicle if you want your charitable legacy to be involving your children. A lot of times I see clients say, I'm going to set up a foundation, I'm going to put my kids on the board, they'll start making the decisions about what we do philanthropically. It's awesome for that. So again, right, this is all about how does it fit for you. You can name a beneficiary in your documents if you have a 401k, life insurance. You can name the charity. And finally, a charitable trust. These are often used if somebody wants to generate income for themselves now and then leave something to charity at the end. There's a lot right here on this slide. Happy to get into more of it. But I wanted to leave us on that note because hopefully all of us are including charity in our planning. So since you guys have been so talkative this morning, questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes, ma'am.
I've heard that it is not a good idea to have the executor be someone who's going to benefit, who's also a beneficiary or an heir. Is that a complete no-no?
it depends. As an attorney, my answer is always it depends. Let's break that down. It is not a great idea to have a beneficiary be the trustee if one of the reasons that you're putting money in trust is creditors. Because if I'm my own trustee and a creditor is coming after me, the court might be more inclined to say, you can get that money out, it's your own trust. Whereas, Kim, if you're the trustee of my trust, the court isn't going to compel Kim to give the money to my creditor. So in that regard, it can get a little bit messy. Short of that, the reason that I think is more applicable, where I generally advise people against having a beneficiary be the trustee, is it puts them in a bit of an awkward position. Unless you're in a situation where there's one beneficiary and that one beneficiary is a trustee, maybe that's fine, they can get the work done. But if you've got 3 kids and you've got one who's going to be in control, oftentimes it leads families to second guess. Oh, I didn't get how much you got, and I didn't see what you did about this. And I know that makes me sound really negative and down on families, and I promise you I am as positive as the day is long, but I've seen it just way too many times where families start to fight. So if you're going to put one beneficiary to be in charge and there's other beneficiaries, I like to guide against that. Is it material illegal or impossible to do that? No, of course not. You could have them be the trustee.
So who generally is the trustee? What's the relationship?
Well, so that depends. In a married relationship, it's the surviving spouse, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. You have a trust, and one of you passes away, the other one's going to just continue to be in control. Oftentimes, I see clients appoint their oldest child. For some reason, everyone just thinks their firstborn is the smartest. I'm the youngest, so just putting that out there. Although my parents asked me to be trustee and I said no, just to give some background. Which we'll get to in a minute. So oftentimes it's kids. A lot of times people ask me about, I'll just put all my kids in charge and they'll just jointly be. No. They're going to fight with each other. They're all going to have to sign every document. It takes forever. It's a nightmare. Just do me a favor and never do that. If that's what's in your documents, change it. Just don't do it. And then the other one is a corporate trustee, which is part of the services that we administer in the bank. So I hate to sound self-serving, but having a corporate trustee is a very good idea. And the reason for that is you're asking an entity, a team that knows what to do, to come in and just get the job done, right? I talked about how timely and efficiently an estate needed to be administered. There's things that need to happen, and we're neutral. I don't care about what happened at Christmas in 1987. I don't care about what mom said you could have out of the curio cabinet. And we laugh, but it's absolutely true. And here's the other thing that happens. I can be the enemy. And I keep saying I because it's part of the job that I do. It's whatever bank you appoint. And trust me, I've got a lot of really, really good competition out there. But having a corporate trustee leads to what's called the common enemy theory, right? So instead of having your kids fight with each other and gang up on each other and be mad at each other, they can all just be mad at the corporate trustee, right? When we come in, we got a job to do. We know what we got to get done. And we've got laws and internal policy and procedures, and we're just going to get it done. And I have seen it time and again where then families say, well, you're not doing this, that, and the other. And is that my favorite part of my job? Of course not. I love it when things go smoothly. But I also like it when the beneficiaries aren't fighting with each other, right? And they're not mad at each other for things that usually are stupid. I mean, I hate to be trivial about it, but people get in fights about the silliest things over money. So I always, always, always recommend that people consider a corporate trustee. And I'm going to follow that up with people, oftentimes their feedback to me is, I don't need a corporate trustee, I don't have enough money. I'm not rich enough. It's not free to have one of your kids be trustee. They can get paid. They're going to need an attorney. They're going to need a CPA. They're going to need an investment advisor. So that got pretty expensive pretty quick, huh? As opposed to paying a corporate trustee. So I always recommend that people consider it. Every once in a while there's a situation I say, no, just have your kid do it. But for the most part, it's a good idea. Yes, ma'am.
And the cost of a corporate trustee, is that determined by the the estate, the size of the
Yes.
estate?
Yep, it's determined by the size of the estate.
So it's a
Incidentally, though, so
percentage.
are attorney's fees. Yeah, it's a percentage, depending on who you work with, it's usually in the ballpark of 1.5% to 2.5% of the assets that are under management.
Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else?
Just curious what
Yeah.
the percentage of population is right now. Oh, curious to what percentage of the population, if you know this or not, is prepared and ready for retirement.
Ooh, prepared and ready for retirement.
Right. I mean, I've heard statistics over the years that have been like scary.
Well, and
For
you know, I
people.
don't have a number statistic, which is disappointing because I obviously just love them so much. What I can tell you is not enough people are prepared. And there's a couple reasons for that. Retirement is still built on a structure that anticipates that you retire in your mid-60s and then pass away in your mid-70s. Not very typical anymore, right? So people were planning for retirement anticipating that they'd be there for, I don't know, 10-ish years in their golden years. And now people are living into their 90s. So they're not prepared for that length of time. And what's unfortunate about women who are a little bit older, they didn't see that coming necessarily, right? It's easier for someone who's still young to say, I'm probably going to be in my golden years for a lot longer. Now, incidentally, I'm probably not going to retire at 65, right? Because I won't be able to afford it. But there is kind of that sandwich of not being prepared.
And
There's-
also
oh.
the assisted living piece. that
Exactly.
Is not being factored in.
The cost of retirement. People think about, oh, what does it cost to live my life right now? How will I sustain my lifestyle right now? Assisted living is phenomenally expensive. You want to have health care in your home? Astronomical. So it is very expensive. And again, insuring for it is a lot easier when you don't need it yet. So we're starting to realize, man, this is really expensive. And sometimes people have already aged out or their health isn't good enough to get long-term care. Care insurance kind of has become a bad word. People kind of think, oh, insurance, I don't know. It has changed a lot in the last few years. So for those of you who have it on your mind, I would consider looking into it a little bit more because they've changed the way those products work a lot. So they're more beneficial to the end user. So I would consider that because it is expensive. And otherwise, who's going to take care of you? Your kids, probably, hopefully, maybe, right? But maybe. But can they afford to? Can your kids afford to take a break from work and take care of you? You know, so that's a big part of it. So I would say, without having a number statistic, not enough people are prepared for retirement.
Where do you go to find good guidance on long-term healthcare insurance?
Great question. I don't want to give out any vendor names, so let's talk offline. But let's say generally you want to go with always in general. This is General Financial Advice 101. A reputable firm with a big name that you trust generally has a big name that you trust for a reason. We talked about your team, and you want to have a team that you work with nicely and you like and you enjoy spending time with and you trust them. And Uma and I and Vivian deliver these services to clients all the time, right? We hope that our clients like us as people, but we also hope that they believe in the institution that we work for. So you do want to know, who are you doing business with? What's their track record? What's their, how are they doing on compliance? How are they doing on funding the insurance pools? There are a lot of independent agencies that will rate companies that way. And even if you do business with, like a private investment advisor, they're generally tied to a platform that is a big name. So that's what I would recommend. But if you want some specific names, I'd be happy to give you some. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
If your employer offers it as a benefit,
Yes.
so that when you have your open enrollment, take advantage of it. Now, it's not going to be the most robust, but it's better to have something than to have nothing at all.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a great point. Let's talk about that for a minute. I put you on the spot earlier and I said, are you contributing to your 401k? It's important to take advantage of the benefits that your company, if you're lucky to work for a big company, take advantage of what they will bring to the table. Oftentimes a company will match what you contribute up to a certain point, but They're not necessarily going to tell you that or remind you, hey, you're not contributing enough. But if your employer matches a 5% contribution and you're only contributing 2%, those are real dollars that you are leaving on the table that your company will give to you. And the thing about contributing to your 401k is you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to contribute 5% or 10% or whatever it is. It feels like this big number. But remember, it's pre-tax dollars. So if you put $10,000 in your 401k, you're not losing out on $10,000 per se, because by the time the money gets to you, it's been taxed. So you're losing out on maybe $6,000 or $7,000, depending on what your bracket's in. So taking advantage of the benefits that your employer provides to you is kind of a no-brainer all day long. What kind of life insurance policies do they provide just for free, right? I mean, employers differ. Some are better than others. And if you run your own company, you've got a whole other set of concerns. But yeah, you don't want to be leaving that kind of money on the table. It's just silly. It's a great point. Anyone else? You guys just look so festive as a crowd. There's so much pink and red out there. I just love it. All right, well, I'll stick around for a while if there's anything that anyone wants to talk about offline. Oh, go ahead, please.
When you provide these services as a member of the bank, do you keep copies of everything? Like I'm thinking of the legacy drawer that my dad has. So it's all of the passwords to banks and things. As an only child, it all falls on me. So that drawer is my best friend. So where...
I'm happy you know where the drawer is, quite frankly.
When the fires happened, I was like, did you bring the drawer with you?
Right. Good.
He's like, I'm safe. And yes, I brought the drawer.
And yes, I have the document.
When we go to other service providers, do you keep copies of things, and is that another benefit?
Sure, that's a great question. It depends on your team, it depends on who your service providers are, and it depends on you. We have some clients who say, I don't want you to know what my trust says, or I don't want you to know what's going on. That's their prerogative, fine. I have other clients for whom we are holding in our fireproof vault their original documents because we're trustee and they're elderly and they're thinking, you're going to need these pretty soon. So there's a pretty big continuum. When it comes to estate planning attorneys, there are two schools of thought generally. There are the attorneys who want to hold your originals for you. These practitioners generally think of that relationship as ongoing, and so they want to have the originals because they think, we're in this together for the long run, I'll be doing business with your kids, so they hold on to them. And then there's the other practitioner who thinks, this relationship is over the day you sign the document. Good luck to you out there. You take the original. So it really depends on who you, and both schools of thought are valid. So it just depends on who you work with. And also depends on what your comfort level is. I honestly love the idea of a legacy drawer. Could he put it in a fireproof little safe? He could get one at Costco. They're not too expensive, but make sure you have the code to it. And you mentioned something else I want to hit on, passwords. A lot of us going paperless statements. I couldn't tell you the last time I got mail from one of my financial institutions. So it used to be when somebody passed away, you watched the mail for a couple months, and after a couple months, you'd gotten all the bills and their bank statements. You had a pretty good idea of where their money was and what was going on. That's not so much the case anymore, right? But if you just call up a bank and say, my dad passed away, can I get access to his account? Good luck, right? My banker friends over here are like, absolutely not. Not a chance. So what do you do? So it is important to make sure that somebody else knows where your passwords are, knows what accounts you have. I mean, keep that information somewhere safe as well, but on a somewhat regular basis. Maybe every year when you're making your financial goals and you're thinking about where do I stand right now, where is that information and who should have it? That's the key part, right? Make sure somebody else has it. So it does you no good if you make a nice list of passwords and nobody knows where to find it. But that's important. The legacy drawer, I like that. I think I might use that. Yes, ma'am.
So that last question reminded me of what just happened to a close friend of mine.
Oh, no.
Her father passed.
Oh gosh. Mm-hmm.
And there's 3 kids, and she got married later in life and changed her name. And now that his estate is being divided up, her name doesn't match the documents. Mm-hmm. And so she called me to say, what am I supposed to do about this? And I had no idea what to tell her. Do you know what that problem is?
Yeah, so It's interesting. I'd be curious to know what attorney she's working with. That's not that uncommon, right? Women get married and change their names pretty frequently. She should be able to demonstrate through historical documents her record keeping related to when she changed her name, that her name used to be what it was. So she should be able to pretty easily prove that she's the same person. Who's giving her a hard time, though? I mean, her own siblings?
No, it's the estate. I don't know. It's not her siblings.
Okay,
It's
good. I was going to say that
it's
would just
the
be really
estate,
insulting.
And and I think most of the assets are held at Vanguard, and they're requiring some sort of medallion document that
Oh,
she's
the
changed her
medallion.
name and she can't get it, and it's. I don't know if this
Interesting.
is relevant to a lot of other people, but I thought
Gosh,
it would
that
be
is-
with the changing the name.
Yeah, that's interesting because generally what happens is in a trust you say, okay, I'd like to give this to my 3 kids, and your daughter has whatever name she had before she got married. And if you change them later in life, maybe you've changed it to account for her married name, but maybe not. It sounds like in this case her parents had her original maiden name and it doesn't have her married name. It's interesting to me that the Financial Institute is requiring proof of that. Does she have a copy maybe of like her birth certificate, something like that? I mean, it sounds like Vanguard's insisting that she come up with a way to prove that she's one and the same. So that's just really strange to me because her name is in the trust agreement. They should be taking direction from the trustee who's saying this is who you need to distribute it to. So I'm kind of curious about that. Maybe we could talk
I don't
offline.
want to
I
get
could get some more
I don't
details
want to get
about
too
it.
into
Yeah.
But I think just the issue is just that the name was changed, and
Yep.
she has to prove that, and she has to prove it in a legal way that's
Yep.
challenging
And so that goes back
because
to
her father hadn't changed. The
exactly.
trust.
That goes back to what we talked about, changing it every few years.
Right.
His family changed, right? His daughter got married. She had a new name. Let's account for that. Should. Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't medallion it. I don't know why they want a medallion on it. But yeah, the marriage certificate. That's awfully odd. You don't want to know. It's like a notary stamp, but you transfer money with it. It's crazy.
What it sounds like is with a medallion. So with a medallion signature guarantee, the document has to match the identification. So if Vanguard created the document with her maiden name and she presents that to the bank where she's to get the medallion and her ID says something else, then that banker needs Vanguard to change the document. That's usually what's required. And so maybe Vanguard saying, no, we won't change it. You have to. So that's probably the disconnect there.
I guess it would be solved if you just
That's
updated.
rude. It would be, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're living, yeah. Also good. You know, we are living in a highly, highly regulated environment for any big bank right now. And we're all kind of shaking our heads. They're probably just kind of scared, oh, this doesn't look right. That just seems a little peculiar to me. But you're absolutely right. Was a change in circumstances maybe should have accounted for. That's just insult to injury, though, isn't it? Ugh. Just dealing with all that. Now they're making it more difficult. That's too bad. I hate to hear that. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Ladies, thank you so much. Can we give another round of applause? The depth of knowledge is unbelievable. A wellspring that just
thank you.
fed us this morning, gave us information, caused us to think thoughts that we dared not think in some cases, and gave us permission to go further into this space and to become comfortable with our wealth.
Yes. Yes.
Empowering.
Yes. Now, are you
you.
going to tell us about the speaker next month? Because she's a woman I've crossed paths with before, and she's pretty incredible. I got a sneak peek.
Well, thank you. We're a good team. Vivian, look out. March 14th, and I'm going to read this. Okay. without glasses. March 14th is our next installment of the Lifelong Learning Women's Forum. Since March is Women's Month, our forum will welcome Dr. Betty Uribe, Executive Vice President of California Bank and Trust. Betty will speak on, she's the author of the book entitled #Values, The Secret of Top-Level Performance in Business and Life. Betty came to the United States from Colombia, from Bogota, Colombia. She was a white-collar family. She had maids and servants helping her as a little girl. She came to the United States almost as a refugee. Her family became, mother was washing dishes, cooking, and for a living. And she always wanted to rise in life to the point where she could buy her mother a home. Betty has gone on to excel in banking, and she is one of the top 50 Hispanic women in the United States of America, the top 50. She is a graduate of the Graduate School of Education and Psychology. She is the chair of our Board of Visitors, and we're delighted to share her with you all March 14th, right here, same time, same station. Amen?
Yeah.
We look forward to it. Betty is most entertaining. She is family and friend. Anything else, Vanessa? Stay dry and be safe.
Yes.
Please avail